Looks like folks are coming in. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Emmanuelle Rapicavoli. I'm the team leader for the Tribal Drinking Water team, and thank you for coming to the Tribal Drinking Water team update session. I'm here with members of our team to discuss several upcoming initiatives and rule changes that impact tribal water utilities. For those that may not be familiar with our team, we implement the Safe Drinking Water Act for public water systems on tribal land in Region 9. And we manage the drinking water and clean water tribal set-aside infrastructure grant programs. I want to emphasize as we enter the 8th month of this pandemic, the importance of the water utility sector. We know the tribal water utilities have had to bear kind of an increased workload with diminishing resources during this challenging time. And just know that the delivery of safe drinking water and sanitation on tribal land is a priority for EPA. And we're here to support you during this critical time. Please reach out to your tribal drinking water team program manager if you work for a tribal water utility, if you need any sort of technical assistance, infrastructure assistance, or have questions about your drinking water that we can help address. We don't have all the solutions, but we'll work with our contractors and our federal partners to help assist you. You can move on to the next slide. Great. So during the session, we have several initiatives that we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with Carly is going to talk about our team's protocol for conducting sanitary surveys during COVID. And then Greg Gholson is going to talk about the Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey and Assessment and the requirements of America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018 as they apply to water systems with populations greater than 3,300 people. Then we're going to pause for some audio questions. I'll say during this time that we are going to be taking questions in the chat, and I will be, myself and my team will be trying to answer those questions in the chat. But if you have an audio question, I'd ask that you pause till after Greg's presentation, and then we'll have a break for questions at the end for audio questions. After the first question break, Jason Gambatese is going to talk about the proposed revisions to the lead and copper rule and how those may impact tribal water utilities. And then lastly, we're going to talk about an exciting new project that we're developing to offer sampling for PFAS compounds at tribal drinking water systems. And Chinn is going to lead that discussion. Then we'll again have some time at the end for audio questions. So I will again welcome. I think please put your name in the chat box if you haven't already, and we'll get going with the agenda. I'll hand it off to Carly. Thanks.
Thanks, Emmanuelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Ho, and among other tasks, I oversee the sanitary survey contract for the Tribal Drinking Water team at EPA Region 9. So just to give you a little background, a sanitary survey is an on-site review of a public water system to assess their capacity to supply safe drinking water to the public. It's required every 3 or 5 years based on the system classification, and they provide us, the drinking water team, an opportunity to provide technical assistance, learn more about the water system, and point out any deficiencies and recommendations to the system. Most sanitary surveys are conducted by contractors or IHS, and this particular sanitary survey update is in regards to the surveys being conducted by our contractors. This year it's Sleeping Giant Environmental Consultants. So last fiscal year in FY20, we postponed 20 surveys due to COVID-19, so they were in the spring. And now those 20 surveys have been added to this year's list, and our contractors are planning to conduct 82 sanitary surveys this fiscal year, serving 42 tribes. The surveys are going to proceed this fall, actually next week. And we've developed a protocol to set expectations for both surveyors and utilities so the risk of COVID-19 is minimized. Next slide, please. A little overview of the protocol. We started out by contacting all 82 water systems being surveyed this year in FY21 to let them know the surveys were being planned. We also requested any input on COVID precautions and local requirements for on-site visits. And listed in this slide are some of the highlights of that protocol. So the first two, only utility staff and contractors will be present for site visit, and EPA staff and technical assistance providers will participate via phone or video conference at entrance and exit meetings. These two items aim to minimize in-person contact while still ensuring that utilities get the technical assistance that they need. And also the protocol mentions masks, physical distancing, disinfection practices, consistent with common practices. And finally, EPA is facilitating contractor compliance with local requirements. So this could be the specific, this could be allowing temperatures to be taken or getting tribal council approval to enter the reservation or other requirements set forth by the tribe that aren't specifically detailed in our protocol. The protocol was sent to systems we've started scheduling surveys with. And as of now, that's the surveys that are scheduled this fall. And then as the surveys happen in the next month, we'll see if any modifications need to be made, make necessary adjustments, and send it to systems to schedule in 2021. We are trying to be flexible as COVID-19, the situation changes from week to week, and we want to still maintain our ability to ensure safe drinking water and prioritize public health. So if you have any questions about the protocol, if you want to know if your water system is being surveyed this year, or any concerns or suggestions, feel free to reach out to me or your program manager that your water systems work with. And that's it. So I'll pass it on to Greg.
Thank you, Carly. So hello, everyone. My name is Greg Gholson, and I'm a member of Region 9's Tribal Drinking Water Team. And today, during this presentation, I will provide an overview of the requirements of the Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey and Assessment, or DWINSA. Next slide, please. So you might ask, what's the background and what's the authority for this national data collection effort? So really quickly, the 1996 amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act established the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and directed EPA to conduct a drinking water infrastructure needs assessment. And right from the mission statement, the goal of the needs assessment is to assess the capital improvement needs of drinking water state revolving fund eligible public water systems in the US and specifically Indian country for drinking water infrastructure construction, rehabilitation, and replacement for a 20-year project period. So a big nationwide data collection effort that is rooted in the authority of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Next slide, please. So the current survey was developed with input from the DWINSA Tribal Work Group, and it's based largely on previous surveys conducted in 1995, 1999, and 2011. Tribal consultation on the assessment or survey was held between September and November of 2019. Next slide, please. So what data will be collected? In general, the survey seeks to assess the 20-year infrastructure needs of drinking water infrastructure needs, and those projects could entail such things as well pump replacement, storage tank and treatment plant rehabilitation, distribution system pipe replacement, and new wells. A caveat there on new wells is the survey seeks to capture information from community water systems and not-for-profit non-community water systems for existing needs. So specific to my point here about new wells, new well is a project and a cost that could be included in the survey so long as the existing well is insufficient for current needs. So again, we're not projecting future needs, but rather collecting data on current needs for the 20-year project period. Additionally, separate surveys have been developed for American Indian and Alaska Native village systems, recognizing the different construction realities and costs, which make comparing projects across these categories difficult. Next slide, please. So how will the data be collected? Please know that this survey instrument won't just fall on your desk, but rather Region 9 staff, us project officers, project managers, will work with your water system staff to complete the survey. In addition, our partners IHS and our technical service contractor RCAC will also support the data collection effort. IHS develop planning documents such as preliminary engineering reports will be important documentation needed as the survey, as part of this survey. So again, IHS is a partner and will be very helpful. Similarly, RCAC, your circuit riders, may be able to provide on-site assistance if needed to better evaluate infrastructure needs at more complex systems. Just a little note here about the universe of systems that will be surveyed as part of this, this effort. Within Region 9, there are 55 systems overseen by us in the regional office and 34 systems regulated by the Navajo Nation. Definitely a subset of our regulated universe, but pretty big and important subset. Another point to mention here is that 75% of the systems on this current list have been previously certified. So many of you may be familiar with this effort. I've gone through it as recent as 2011, and it's our hope that for those systems, this will simply be an update to the information provided in 2011 and will be a little easier lift for many of you. Next slide, please. So the importance of the survey. I'll just talk briefly about this, but this is really not just a random survey, but again, it's critical information for EPA as we budget for future needs, and specifically that the survey results will be used to determine regional distribution of drinking water tribal set-aside funds. The results from the survey will also be reported to Congress, and that'll assist them in long-term budgeting for our program. As many of you know, the universe of tribal drinking water systems in Region 9 is large, and for that reason, the results from our survey, meaning those systems in Region 9 that will be surveyed, will be used to extrapolate tribal needs nationwide. So for that reason, your participation in the survey is critical to the success of EPA's Drinking Water Tribal Set-Aside Program. Next slide, please. So what can you do now? Many of you might want to get a head start. This is a big lift. Prior to the survey, utility operators should begin collecting information to document infrastructure needs. That could be in the form of a capital improvement project that your council has approved, maybe some independent estimates of costs associated with a drinking water upgrade project that you're looking at. Of course, I mentioned this earlier. You should consider IHS as an excellent resource, and they have, as you know, many documents such as preliminary engineering reports, project budgets, and other information that'll be very helpful to document project needs. The DWINSA data collection effort, kind of where are we now? So again, this is a nationwide information collection effort that requires the Office of Management and Budget's approval. So this survey instrument is currently being reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget. We hope we're hopeful that that comes out soon and we can start data collection and working with you around the first of the year, meaning January 1st, 2021. That's somewhat uncertain. Once the survey instrument makes it out of OMB, we anticipate a year for data collection. So please rest assured there won't be a tight time frame, and there's multiple resources to assist you in properly completing the survey. Lastly, again, once this survey instrument comes out of OMB, we plan on sending a letter. We're hoping to get that. Actually, I'll take a step back. We'll likely send that letter before the survey is released from OMB, just to give you a heads up that you've been selected, that list is final. So we anticipate sending that letter in the next couple of weeks. It'll give you a heads up that you've been selected, and that'll still give you plenty of time to prepare before the official survey collection period begins. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll switch gears here and talk very briefly about America's Water Infrastructure Act. Next slide, please. So AWIA, as this is referred to, is a relatively new law. It was signed into law in 2018, and this law requires community drinking water systems serving greater than 3,300 people to develop or update risk assessments and emergency response plans no later than June 2021 and December 31st, 2021, respectively. So I'll pause on this a little bit. There are multiple deadlines associated with larger systems. Specific to this audience, those systems that have been selected all fall into this category of greater than 3,300, less than, I believe it's 49,999. So for you all, these are the dates to be aware of. The June 30th, 2021 to develop or update your risk assessment. 6 months later, December 31st, 2021 to update your emergency response plan. Once those plans are updated, public water systems are required to certify that to EPA that the risk assessments and ERPs have been developed or updated by the due dates. But I'll clarify that the plans themselves do not need to be submitted to EPA, and they should be stored securely at the water system due to the sensitive nature of the information contained in these plans. Next slide, please. Here we go. So again, I just wanted to touch briefly on this requirement. Many of you may have participated in a presentation yesterday. Ms. Charlene Cormandy from EPA's Headquarters Office of Water Security provided an in-depth overview of the AWIA requirements and focused on technical resources available to support this effort. She explained that while not yet announced, her office headquarters plans on holding a virtual training session on AWIA for systems within Region 9. And I'm told that the training session will occur over 3 days between November 3rd and 5th of this year. So details forthcoming on that. What I'll highlight here is this URL or internet address. I highlight the website that includes an online training resource. Here you can see on this slide that if you chose to visit this site, you can take a look and actually walk through yourself a virtual training program that EPA has developed. The two documents that Charlene highlighted yesterday that I think are really useful are guidance documents and templates for both the risk assessment and ERP. And again, those guidance documents and step-by-step templates to complete this effort are available on EPA's Water Resiliency website, pretty easy to navigate. And I'd encourage you to take a look there for resources and other information on AWIA. So I think that's it. And before Jason starts, this is where we had hoped to pause for questions. So if anyone has questions about either sanitary survey protocols or AWIA or DWINSA, please feel free to unmute yourself and pose a question. Of course,
Hey,
the
Greg.
chat box works well too.
Hey, Greg, this is Jason. Just a clarification on the due dates. So the ERP is due 6 months after you certify you've completed the risk assessment. So if you certify early, your ERP is due earlier. So you can sit on that and wait to your certification, until that deadline, and give yourself more time to complete that ERP.
Very important point. Thank you for that clarification, Jason. And of course,
So there was a, go ahead.
Specific to AWEA, WINZA, or I guess any of these presentations, always feel free to reach out to your program manager and we'll point you to the right resource and help you through as best we can.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat about if my community population is 4,000, but we have 3 separate PWSs that serve the community, do I need to develop this plan? And so that I think I posted in the chat that the population is by individual public water system. And so it's not your combined community population if they're served by individual public water supplies. Yeah, okay, great. And yes, we'll remind Charlene to post the AWEA presentation from yesterday. Thanks for the reminder. Randy, let's see, I'm just looking through the chat. Yeah, and what I heard yesterday from Charlene was that those water systems that were required to complete these AWEA requirements are in a database that's managed by our water security division. The AWEA requirements are run out of our headquarters office. So they should be sending you reminders. If you have not been receiving reminders from headquarters and you have a public water supply that has a population greater than 3,300, then I recommend getting in contact with Greg or myself, and we'll make sure to get you into that database. There was a question in the chat. Does AWEA apply to systems that serve 3295 homes or residences? So the 3,300 is population. It's not service connection. So if you have 3295 homes, it's likely that AWEA would apply because your population should be greater than 3,300. I know it's confusing because in a lot of rules we go by population and sometimes we go by service connections, but this threshold is by population. That answers it. Great. I know we covered a lot in those first 15 minutes. So folks, think of other questions related to the sanitary survey protocol, the needs survey. There's going to be quite a bit more to come on that. If you're one of those 55 systems that we're going to be surveying this year, and AWEA as well. So please post your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them, and we'll try and make sure that these trainings are posted on the website, especially the AWEA one, so folks can download it. All right. Yeah, we're going to send out a letter, Lisa, in the next couple of weeks. I don't think we've notified the 55 systems yet. So stay tuned. All right, I think it's 9:25, so I'll hand it off to Jason. And again, there'll be more opportunities for questions at the end of the last 2 presentations. Thanks.
Thanks, Emmanuelle. So I'll be talking about the lead and copper rule revisions. If you were, in loop on this, the proposed rule came out this time last year. So I want to give an update on kind of where things are and what was in that rule. Next slide, please. Whoa. Okay, thank you. So just a little bit of background on kind of how we got to this point. So, you know, this actually goes all the way back to the early 2000s, 2002 when this started, when DC had their lead issues. EPA recognized that there was some problems with the existing rule, and so they decided to make some quick short-term changes, and then, you know, have on the list to do some, you know, bigger long-term changes. So the short-term revisions came out in 2007, and then in 2010 we got started on working on this long-term revisions, and it's gone through many iterations in the last 10 years, various stakeholder involvement. We had the NIDWAC got involved and helped out quite a bit. That's the National Drinking Water Advisory Committee. And so they developed a report to help us, guide us on these revisions. And then Flint happened in the middle of all this, and that kind of impacted things. And then we had a administration change. So that definitely, you know, changed the way we were headed. So as I said, the proposed rule actually was published in November 13th, 2019. And then this current rule, it is close to being finalized right now. It's currently sitting with OMB, and they're kind of hashing out the differences with headquarters. And, you know, we hope to see a final rule really anytime now. Next slide, please. So, you know, the information we have is based on the proposed rule and some of the stuff we've heard that's going to be in the final, or maybe in the final rule, but until OMB signs off on it and it gets released, we don't really know exactly what it's going to look like. So, you know, this information I'm presenting to you could possibly change, but, you know, this is, you know, as current as we have it right now. So there's, you know, kind of there's many issues, but I will talk about what I think are the important ones that are impact tribes or tribal water systems based on, you know, our implementation of the existing lead and copper rule over the last, you know, 20 years. So I'm going to give more detail on almost all these items after this, but we're going to have something called a lead trigger level, which is going to be set at 10 ppb. We are keeping the existing lead action level at 15, but I'll discuss what the implications of that would be. We're going to have mandatory survey, you know, material survey of all service line connections, and this has to be done within 3 years. You know, we've been finding that, you know, a lot of tribal utilities just do not know, you know, what's in the ground you know, especially when we're talking about service connections. So this is something that will have to be completed. We made a big effort in 2016 to make sure everyone had correct and up-to-date site sample plans. Well, we're going to have to do that again under this rule because we are changing the tiers and what they represent. We will also have to designate water quality parameter sample locations in the distribution system if you have to conduct that sampling. There's some new requirements for systems that have individual taps above 15. I mean, you're all familiar with, you know, calculating your 90th percentile. Well, now we're going to be looking at individual results, and you may have to take isolated action at those homes or in those areas of the distribution system under something we're calling find and fix. The other item is, you know, anytime you're going to make a change to your treatment process, anything significant or adding a new source, you will now need EPA approval in writing to make that change. I'm not going to, that one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to get into more detail about that. And then finally, there's requirement for school and childcare sampling. So next slide. So lead trigger level. So what is this all about? It's very similar to the action level exceedance, but you know what I'm saying, it's less burdensome. There, you have to do some of the same stuff, but not as much. You know, you will be required to do water quality parameter sampling. And you will also have to get started on the corrosion control treatment recommendations, but it stops right there. You make the recommendation and then you're done with the rest of the steps, as opposed to if you actually exceed the action level. But one big part of this is, it's what we're calling strike one. So under the existing rule, if you have an action level exceedant, you start doing your corrosion control treatment steps. And then if you have 2 6-month periods below the action level, you could stop those steps. But then as soon as you have another action level exceedant, you have to complete those steps to the end. So that's what we're calling 2 strikes. So if you start off with a trigger level exceedance, then that is your first strike. And so you just would need 1 action level exceedance after that to be basically kicked into corrosion control treatment for good. Next slide. So service line inventory. So this is a kind of a big deal because, in a lot of utilities, they do not own, a portion or all of the service line. It's the homeowner. So, to know what that material is, if a homeowner replaced that line and didn't, tell the water system, they may not have any idea of what's under the ground. And obviously there's not a good way to look at that. But, so regardless of that, I should say, you have to put every service line into one of these 4 categories. Either it's lead or it's galvanized requiring replacement, which means any galvanized pipe that was at any time downstream of a lead pipe. Why is that important? Because galvanized pipe has iron in it, and iron will attract lead. So if you have a lead pipe that was downstream at some point in the past and leached any lead, that lead could absorb to that galvanized pipe and thus become a future lead source. So that's why, we're treating galvanized pipe like this. The third category is non-lead, and then the last one is lead status unknown. So, there could be situations like I was describing where you just don't know and you have to put unknown. But you have to update this inventory annually. So as you, go about your normal day-to-day activity with your water system, you may encounter these lines, and then, they go from unknown to known, and, then you need to update your inventory and put it in the appropriate category. And depending on, how these things are classified will determine your requirements under the rule. For example, systems with lead service lines have different requirements than systems without lead service lines. As far as we know, there's no lead service lines in any of our tribal systems. I don't know about the galvanized. That's another issue we haven't really talked about with our systems. And so when you create this inventory, it must be made to your public and have access information in your CCR. Next slide. So find and fix, what is this all about? So anytime you have an individual home test over 15 parts per billion, you have to do a repeat sample within 30 days, assuming you can get the homeowner to cooperate. And then you have to do water quality parameter monitoring in that area. And this includes a pH measurement. And this is kind of a big deal, well, from what we've seen in the past, because this monitoring has to take place within 5 or 14 days, the way it's currently written, which the difference being, if you already have treatment in place, you have to get it done within 5 days. If you don't have corrosion control treatment, you have 14 days. But pH measurements need to be done in the field. You can't send that to a lab to have it done. A lot of systems that don't have treatment don't have these pH meters available to them. And so they have to somehow get a meter and take that test within 14 days. And then if you do have treatment in place, you have to reevaluate it to see if you need to make any tweaks. Now, the other part to this is, which is not on this slide, is some new PN requirements. So, you may be familiar, or hopefully you're familiar that, when you take lead samples currently, you have 30 days to get the results to those homeowners. If they test over 15, the rule, the way it's written, you would have to get the results to them within 3 days. And then if your entire system, if you exceed the 15 as an action level, your 90th percentile is above 15, then, under the, I keep getting this confused, whether it's the WIN Act or a WIA, one of those, Congress mandated that EPA require that systems notify the entire community within 24 hours of determining that 90th percentile. So that's kind of a big deal, and it's going to be require water systems to really look at the data when it comes in from the lab. Next slide, please. So school and childcare sampling. So you may be familiar with the efforts that EPA and Region 9 did with trying to sample tribal schools. We sampled at about 100, a couple of years back. So this requirement is going to, require that all water systems, notify, well, first they have to inventory all their schools and childcare facilities in their service area. And then they have to reach out to them to see if they want to get sampled. And if they say yes, the water systems have to offer sampling of up to at least 20% of them each year. And the idea is you would do 5 samples at a school and 2 at a childcare facility. And then, potentially you'd space it out, you'd do in 5-year blocks. And then you would do each facility twice over a 10-year period if they're interested. But these samples are not part of your normal compliance samples. In fact, they're not even at the same volume. We're looking at doing a 250 milliliter sample. So if the levels are over, an action level, then we're looking at, working with the school, working with IHS or any, public health agency in the area to, look at remediating the faucets or, figuring out what the source of that lead is and remediating that. Next slide. So lastly, there's something called a small system flexibility option in the rule. And this is geared towards kind of making things a little bit easier for the small system. So we're talking about any community water system serving less than 3,300 and actually all non-transient, non-community water systems. And what this would allow is it gives you the water system 4 options to choose from, and you can just choose one of them and not do the others. Under, if you're not getting this option, you may have to, conduct multiple of these options for a larger system. And so these 4 options are expedited lead service line removal. So if you don't have lead service lines, obviously that's not an option. You could just do optimized corrosion control treatment, which is kind of the main choice under the regular rule. You could install point of use devices in lieu of treatment. And then the one that we're really excited about is the removal of all lead bearing premise plumbing in a building. This is really more applicable for, non-transient, non-community systems that control all the plumbing, but it also could be used in some very small community water systems where you have access to all the plumbing. But, for situations where long-term treatment just doesn't seem feasible, the idea of allowing a system to just replace all their plumbing and be done with it forever just seems like a much better option, because there's nothing better than getting the lead out. Treatment is only as good as the treatment itself, but if there's no lead to begin with, then that's the best way to go. So I believe that's my last slide. Yes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chinn, and I'll be talking a little bit about PFAS compounds in drinking water, as well as our planned sampling program for tribal drinking water systems in Region 9. So some of you may have attended Matt Small's presentation about PFAS, which hopefully will be some good context if you did attend that. And if not, I'll try to provide a little bit of context as well. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background about PFAS. So it's a group of more than 4,000 synthetic chemicals that have been extensively used in a wide array of consumer and industrial products since the 1940s, such as nonstick coating and cookware, textiles, as well as firefighting foam. And so this picture in the top right is 2 PFAS compounds, which are PFOA and PFOS, which were 2 of the most widely studied compounds, just because they found them pretty widespread in the U.S. Historically. And so the U.S. has been pretty successful in phasing out the manufacturing of these two compounds. However, one thing about PFAS is that they don't degrade well in the environment. So they're still these two compounds are still found in groundwater across the U.S. But the EPA is also developing new methods to analyze for more PFAS. And so as we develop these new methods, we're kind of finding more and more different PFAS in drinking water across the U.S. And so this is a rapidly evolving field. So over the past decade or two, EPA has been researching the toxicity of PFAS. And so it's been an ongoing effort, and it's still very much ongoing. We do know that PFAS are mobile, persistent in the environment, as well as bioaccumulative in humans, and they don't really degrade well in the environment. And it's also been shown that many PFAS are associated with adverse health effects in humans. And so you can find more information on PFAS on EPA's webpage. It kind of talks a little bit more about the basic information about PFAS and some of EPA's actions to address it. And it's a very good resource. So some of the PFAS efforts that have been undertaken in Region 9. So PFAS were, there's an EPA effort to sample for these compounds in drinking water under the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, or UCMR. And so in the third UCMR, which was from 2013 to 2015, they sampled for 6 PFAS compounds. And the list of systems included 11 tribal public water systems in Region 9. And they only found 1 detection of PFAS compounds at a system. And so that well was taken offline, and they resampled 6 months later and 1 year later, and they both returned non-detections. So yeah, those UCMR. There's also been a couple statewide PFAS sampling efforts in 2018 and 2019 by California and Arizona. And in California, they're actually planning to continue quarterly monitoring yearly, or every year. And yeah, so in 2016, EPA set a lifetime health advisory for PFOA and PFOS in drinking water at 70 parts per trillion. And then in February of this year, they made a preliminary determination to regulate these 2 compounds. But it will probably be maybe 3 to 5 years before an MCL is actually established. But this preliminary determination kind of pushed our team to take more proactive steps to determine whether PFAS compounds are present in tribal systems, and to kind of get a more robust data set for tribal drinking water systems. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the sampling program that we're planning to offer. There will be a voluntary sampling program to tribal public water systems in Region 9 to sample for more than 20 different PFAS in drinking water. And this will hopefully allow the tribes to learn more about drinking water quality, and as well as increase consumer confidence. And so we are offering this to all tribal systems that want to participate, and we'll solicit tribes' participation on some sort of a rolling basis. And so this program will be at no cost to tribes, and will be voluntary. And because PFAS are not currently regulated, it is kind of extra regulatory, and so there are no regulatory requirements for these compounds. And so for this program, the water operators will be the ones actually taking the samples. So we will ship sample bottles out and shipping material, and then the water operators will collect the samples and ship it back to the regional lab for analysis. And the shipping costs will be covered by EPA. So RCAC will also most likely have some sort of role with technical assistance for this program, including training on sample collection, as well as shipping assistance if it's needed. Next slide, please. So this is all kind of preliminary, but I guess once the results are determined for the samples, EPA will work with the utility on consumer notification and any follow-up guidance or additional sampling that may be needed, and kind of an estimated timeline. So we're planning to send out invitations probably sometime in the winter or spring of 2021. And the reason for this is it's kind of contingent on getting our regional lab to have the capacity to analyze these samples. So they currently they don't have the method or the equipment to analyze these samples, but they're working on procuring equipment and getting a method ready to analyze for PFAS in drinking water. And so that kind of is what our timeline is based off of. And so yeah, invitations winter, spring of 2021, and planning to have sampling starting in the spring 2021, possibly summer, and kind of continue them on a rolling basis to all systems that want to participate. And then results will also kind of be on a rolling basis depending on when you ship the samples to the lab. And so hopefully they will get results back within about a month after sampling. Next slide, please. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. So stay tuned for more information from us about this sampling program. And please let your program manager know if you have any questions or comments, or feel free to email me. So yeah, I think I'll open the floor for questions again to either me or Jason.
While you guys are thinking, I mean, you could ask questions on anything, but some came in on the chat that I answered, but I'll just respond for the whole group. So one of the questions was, if you currently have an approved site under the original or existing lead and copper rule at a school or child care facility, does that get you out of the school sampling? And the answer would be no. But then the follow-up question was, should you take that sample out of your sample set at that point? And that depends, because we are changing the tiers. You know, that will dictate what your future sample site will be. And to give a little bit more information about the tiers, I know some of you maybe struggle with trying to find the age of a home, or, there's a kitchen remodel that messed that up. So the ages are kind of all been thrown out now. It's more about whether you have a lead service line or whether you have, copper pipe with lead solder, or, that's kind of, where we're stopping. And then, galvanized pipe downstream is another one. So I think there's 5 or 6 tiers now. And most of you guys will fall in the lower tiers. I don't think we're going to find too many. They, obviously no lead service lines. Galvanized is unknown. There's still a handful of lead solder out there, but I think it will be easier to figure out your tiers this time around.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for all the good questions in the chat. If folks have more questions for the team, this is a good opportunity. You can unmute yourself or pose more chat-related questions related to any of the topics. The previous slide had contact information for each of the presenters, but again, if you have questions about any of the material, definitely reach out to your individual program managers, and we'll get you the answers. You can go to the next slide, Loretta, and I'll just briefly hit on a couple of upcoming opportunities for those who are interested in drinking water and infrastructure in particular. So I just wanted to mention a couple there sessions at the Tribal Conference that are happening next week. One is on October 20th from 9 to 11. Nancy Sakabason is hosting an infrastructure funding assistance forum for drinking water and wastewater systems. And there'll be speakers from Indian Health Service, USDA Rural Development, and HUD, the main federal agencies that fund infrastructure for tribal drinking water and wastewater systems. And then later that afternoon, Jonathan Rash is going to lead a discussion of IHS's SDS system from 2:35 to 3:35. So all good opportunities. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention our Tribal Drinking Water Conference. We had originally scheduled this for May of 2020, but postponed it due to COVID. And we're still planning to host the conference in April of 2021. Unfortunately, we had hoped to have it in person, but we're going to make it a virtual event. And as soon as it's safe to have an in-person event, we're going to do that. But we don't want to go too long without having these training opportunities. And this is a great opportunity for tribal utility operators to get critical training, critical utility training. It's a great event. So watch out for more information that's coming on that training. Let's see. Heidi had a question about PFAS sampling. Would we include that in our CCR results? I think that's a good question. I think depending on what the results of the PFAS sampling are, we'd make recommendations for consumer notification. There wouldn't be a requirement. There's no regulatory requirement, but it's likely if you did get a detection that we would require, or we would recommend, some sort of notification to your consumers. That answers the question. Really good question. Cool. Great. Any other questions about any of the topics? We're excited to roll out the PFAS sampling, but like Ian said, we're kind of gearing up the lab to offer the, to get the equipment ready and the method ready. So we're a few months out, but we wanted to share with you that we're working on this and excited to offer it in the spring of next year. Right. Yeah, Brandy, I need to send this presentation to Vanessa, but we'll get it uploaded onto the media tab to download. Thank you for the reminder. That's a good question, Carola. So, are any tribal water systems that use surface water as source water interested in cyanotoxin monitoring? So let's see. I believe that, and my team can probably correct me if I'm wrong, that some cyanotoxin will be included in the UCMR 5 sampling. But we do have one surface water system that, oh great, you perform analysis in Lake County and want to offer it. I do know that there's one surface water system in Humboldt County that does routinely monitor their source water for cyanotoxins, and they have a treatment system. But that's great to know that you have analysis in Lake County. Do you offer it for specific cyanotoxins, Carola? I hope I'm saying your name right. Microcystin, awesome. If you have a need for microcystin analysis, that's great to know that that's available. And we'll start anatoxin next year. Great.
Yeah, so Jefferson brings up an interesting point for Corolla. You know, we could talk about regulated tribal surface water systems, but you know, we don't have any information on who may be using surface water for agriculture. So that may be something you want to reach out to the broader community on and see if there's any interest in testing at those situations, assuming you offer that testing.
Yeah, good point. Great. I think we have 1 minute left. Really appreciate all the good questions and engagement. And definitely reach out to anyone on your program manager, any of the contacts here if you have questions, and we'll try and get all these presentations uploaded to the website.
Yeah, once the lead and copper rule revisions come out, there'll definitely be more detailed training for that regulation for sure through us and RCAC.
All right. Looks like our sessions needs to end to move on to the next one. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And Carola just posted her contact info in the chat if you're interested in cyanotoxin monitoring. But I'll hand it over to you, Melissa, to end the session. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.